When it comes to Christian ethics, most people think of biblical passages, and that's the same for myself. The first one that comes to mind is one from Matthew 7:12. So, in everything do to others what you would have them do to you, for this sums up the law of the prophets. Now, this is also known as the Golden Rule, which is usually the first thing that most children are taught as they are growing, that they need to treat others the way that they wanted to be treated. And I feel that this is also a reminder that we are all God's children, and because of this, we should treat everybody the same. The second lesson that comes to my mind comes from Leviticus 19:18 to be exact. Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against anyone among your people, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. In my opinion, the ability to forgive is a unique ability that we have been given. And when we forgive people, it does help set us free. When we hold resentment, our hearts become extremely heavy, which is why we have that feeling of freedom when we let it go. Another thing to think about is we are all created in God's image, so therefore, if we hold a grudge against a person, it technically would be holding a grudge against God. It's also important to remember that we have been forgiven for our transgressions against the Lord, so we should be able to forgive those who harm us. The third also comes from Matthew 6:1. Be careful not to practice righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your brother in heaven. This is also known as humility, and humility is not always exactly understood. While it is important to do good things, it's also important to not do them to be acknowledged for them. Unfortunately, when we do this, it shows that we have a sense of pride, and as we all know, pride is considered a sin. While taking this course, I've come across 3 things that I enjoyed learning about, one of them being stem cell research. And the question we need to ask ourselves is the research ethical? And in my opinion, the answer to this is yes and no. It is ethical if we use adult stem cells, which come from either bone marrow from a child or an adult, or umbilical cord blood, which is from your umbilical cord. Now, where we come into the unethical area is when we use embryonic stem cells. These are only able to be harvested by destroying an embryo. And an embryo is still a person, it is just in its beginning phase. Person is always going to be a person, and they're just going to be in different phases. And it is never okay to take the life of one in order to better another. The next topic is physician-assisted suicide and euthanasia. Now, while these sound similar, there are some differences. Physician-assisted suicide is usually when a person wants to be known as die with dignity. This is when a doctor will provide a prescription for a patient and instructions on how to end their life. Now, it's usually a strong form of painkillers. Now, euthanasia, on the other hand, the doctor is actually performing the role. They are actually giving the dose of medication. And according to Scott Ray in our textbooks, this is also known as a mercy killing, because this is usually what happens at the end of a person's life. There are no longer any options, and they are usually in some very intense pain. The third and final topic that I found not the final topic, but the third topic that I found extremely interesting is capital punishment. And the question we need to ask ourselves is it right to take a life in the name of the law? Now, when asking ourselves this question, we have to think about certain things. We have to know that capital punishment is only used in the most heinous of crimes, which is usually murder, and crimes against children. And that they have to meet several different criteria in order to be sentenced to this. It is also one of the main arguments against it is there are no second chances when sentenced to death. However, when a person is sentenced to the death penalty, they are usually on death row for many, many years, sometimes up to 30, 35 years. And when somebody when they are given this, they don't usually receive the actual death penalty. Most of the time, they will die in prison from natural causes. Therefore, while there is no second chance after you have died, very often is not done before their time. Now, during this course, we came across many different case studies that I found were very, very interesting to read. One example that I came across myself while researching was on end-of-life ethics for euthanasia and assisted suicide. Now, this is a study done by Dennis Sullivan, who is a doctor. The scenario that we have here is our friend Steve. He is looking forward to retirement. He's 65 years old. Just a few weeks ago, he noticed that his clothes were getting kind of loose, and so he went to the doctor because he also had some pain in his lower back. He went to the doctor, they sent him to a specialist, and about 2.5 weeks later, they found out that he had incurable pancreatic cancer. Now, he's always been pretty active, Steve, and he knows that when it's time to go, he'll go. Doesn't really always attend church very much, and he's not very close to his family. As a matter of fact, the only friend that he really has would be you, which is why he is coming to ask you your opinion. He has been offered a machine that will, quote and unquote, make all of his problems disappear by Dr. Jack, who is an acquaintance of his. So now Steve has come to your home to ask your opinion. Now, the first thing I would tell Steve is it's not good to make a rash decision. You're talking about ending your life. This is not a decision that should be taken lightly. And it's definitely not a decision you should be making when you're emotional. I would also remind him of all the research that is being done on a daily basis and that a cure may be found any day. He may decide to take his life today, but tomorrow the cure for cancer could be found. I would also remind him that while he is not close to his family right now, there is no reason why he cannot become close to his family. Getting a diagnosis of cancer is definitely a reason to want to become closer to your family. You want to spend the last of the time you have, and if you decide to end your life early, you are taking that time away from your family. And at the end of our conversation, I would hope that he would take what I said and use that in his decision making, and hopefully he would decide that he would not end his life. Now, there have been many, many different topics that we discussed, and for the most part, I've been able to understand. However, there is still one that I'm kind of on the fence with, and that is physician-assisted suicide or euthanasia. And the reason I struggle with this is because I have seen close friends and family members die of cancer. And at the end, they're not even aware any longer because of the pain. I cannot, in good conscience, even though I know we should not take God's job in our hands, I cannot fully say in good conscience that we should not allow a person to end their suffering. If they are at the end of their life and their days are just racked with pain, I believe that we should allow them to go peacefully. They should not have to feel the agonizing pain that they would feel if they stayed with us for just a couple of more days. They are at the end of their life. There is no chance whatsoever. Now, people can argue, and I can understand as well, that as long as your heart is beating, you have a chance. Which is why I'm not able to really make a decision. And I don't really know if there is anything that can be given to me to help me make a decision. Because this is something that is extremely personal. And it really hits home with a lot of people.